Hello everyone. I, Varun Agarwal, welcome you all to another web panel discussion organized by ETCIO in partnership with NetMagic. And today we are discussing why DR on cloud is more necessary than any other time in history. COVID-19 pandemic has thrown off the disaster recovery plans for thousands of companies right out of the window. Being able to adapt to an event like this requires agility more than infrastructure. Several researchers have shown that companies using cloud have been the least impacted by the pandemic. Adding another layer to the cloud benefit is looking at DR as a service. And so today's discussion, we'll talk about how you can go through, we'll actually take you through how DR as a service can transform your DR planning forever. So before we go ahead with the discussion, I'll request everyone to share their questions for the panelists in the chat window. We'll take them up after the presentation. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our panel today. So our first panelist is Jay Prakash Sharma, who's the Executive Vice President, Technology Operations at InfoEdge. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Varun.
Our second speaker of the day is Girish Sharma, who's the Senior General Manager, Products and Services at Entity NetMagic. Welcome, Girish.
Thank you, Varun.
So we go right into the discussion, starting with Jay. So Jay, we'll start probably with the same premise I started the discussion with, which is about how COVID-19 has completely washed away the DR plans for most organizations. So just getting some perspective from you, if you can talk about where was the missing links in the DR planning that you observed in many organizations.
Thank you, Varun, for first of all providing me this opportunity to talk on such an interesting topic. Uh, Certainly, like COVID-19 pandemic has put across a reality check for our BCPDR plan across the organization, and it specifically presents a serious threat to people, business, economics across the world. And trust me, somewhere I was reading through, and maybe like it's a Gartner's study, which says globally, I think like only 10 to 12% organization worldwide were prepared for such kind of pandemic, where their BCP plan was ready. Uh, what are what are the major issues on the existing VR plan, especially from an Indian context or a non-matured organization context per se? Trust me, my experience is like most of our DR plans, like whatever we do, are either somewhere outdated, you call it, or unrealistic. When I say so, I mean, certainly I do not want to offend anybody because I am on the same boat as well. I feel like it has been specifically created by the users keeping IT in the mind more than business in the mind. That's where like there is an inadequate BCP testing happens. That is one point which I would like to highlight. The second one, probably I would say like most of our DR plans uh, are somewhere people dependent uh, or a typical skill dependent, where we don't do a reality check when exactly it is required. At that time, you realize when the crisis comes. At that time, you realize while execution of that DR, why it has failed because like it was dependent on a typical skill or dependent on a typical person, and that person is no more with the organization, or maybe like he is not available at that particular situation when it was demanded. Uh, Also, one gap which I could say from this is from my practical experience that we do a DR drill, and that DR drills are done with a planned scope. So when I say with a planned scope, at that time we might have done a sample set of real traffic or auto scale feature test, but while doing the failover to DR, and again, when we say like failback, doing the failback or scale down of the DR, bring everything back to the primary location. At the time, like either we are not prepared to excel or scale based on the real traffic, or might be like the application is not thoroughly tested for that particular environment. This is kind of like the third point. From another very critical perspective, which I say like cyber security. So, from a production environment perspective, normally like we are quite quite prepared for the exploits and uncertainty, and that's the reason like the whole environment is uh, rigorously going through VAPT kind of testing, so that like from a security standpoint as well, like our environment should be covered. Most of the organization does that, but at the same time, do we give enough or adequate focus on VAPT for the DR environment? That is another fourth point which I would like to bring as a gap. Then the way I said, like DR drills are tested as per the runbook, but the full BCP drill is always a gap. Trust me, because like here specifically we are focusing on the human resource or mobility point of view. So whether my remote access policy is updated, whether my rest of the staff, which might be non-tech staff or maybe like a operations staff, are they aware about the security awareness? Yeah, is there adequate and effective security log monitoring? All those things like are in place, specifically keeping the DR in mind. I mean, in short, like I would say, like these are 4 or 5 points. Typically, I would like to say, like that's the point, like we should be focusing on.
I
Back to
think
you, Professor.
that's a very interesting point that you talked about. Girish, like Jay was talking about, too much focus on IT and too less focus on business in terms of DR planning. Uh, when it comes to looking at the architecture of DR planning, we have DR as a service, DR on premise. DR as a service seems to be a new proposition that we're talking about. Can you talk about how different it is, and does DR as a service can actually bring business to the fore instead of just IT?
Okay, so thanks, Varun. Thanks for, first of all, it's a privilege to be here with you all. It's wonderful. Very relevant topic. So I think just to put it in the context, DR as a service is, of course, it has been gaining currency for a long time. But most importantly, the very first question actually brought the gist of the discussion today. The COVID-19 has washed away a lot of plans. I see one important thing which I would like to add to this panel, that one of the key changes that we observe there, which is unprecedented, right? All businesses are driven by market, and markets are driven by consumers. Such an unprecedented change like COVID-19 has done one important thing. The consumer behaviors are changed, right? That itself creates a new kind of market. And that Jay rightly put it, that it was more about business rather than only about IT, right? So it was more about the business scenario was unprecedented. Businesses were never, they like forecasted such a scenario and they were never ready from a business itself. Coming back, we were talking a lot about digitization. So digitization was supposed to address any kind of business requirements, right? This itself was unprecedented, and of course, everybody was caught off guard. So very true, COVID-19 has washed away a lot of plans of people, and that's where even DR, to say, if I want to run my minimum business as usual, also do I have the DR, right? So while our perspective might be, I want to do BCP, a lot of people coming back and asking, can I do my minimum business as usual run, and do I have a DR? So of course, both the perspectives stand straight before us, that an unprecedented market change and unprecedented business requirement, and here we are talking about DR as a service. So very right time. So yes, DRS service have evolved over the time. It is definitely impacted by multitude of factors. When Jai was mentioning an important point, he was mentioning about DR drills. I just recall that I happened to go at some places and I was in some meeting and suddenly the fire drill was announced, right? And it was like a very casual activity. What it is, it's a fire drill, right? You're just being prepared in case something happens. And it's casually people are going, it's like no drill. They're just participating because it's a compliance, right? So I correlated that with DR drill. Maybe he rightly put it that we do DR drill, but we are not actually testing it fully to be ready. DR as a service should cover DR drill as well. So what I'm bringing the point, a DR as a service has become very integrated now, right from defining a basic replication, right from defining different workloads will have different RPO and RTO requirement, doing a DR drill and setting the right expectation. That's the important thing which I always cite as part of my overall DR as a service. By right expectation, I mean that DR is a cost like insurance, right? Not all organizations have embraced that they want to spend a lot on this insurance, but at the same time, that's what our IT organizations, you, me, and we all are part of that IT fraternity, where we face this challenge. When we go with cost justification, we should always take our objective justification as well. This is a critical workload, and I need a complete business continuity plan here. That's why I will need so many resources in the event of a DR, and that's how well prepared I am. With the cloud and DR as a service coming into play, there are many options. I always talk about it like that. Very simply, an insurance sector, the more is the coverage of insurance sector, they can bring in many low cost insurance solutions. The same thing goes for DR, that you will see DR as a service is actually offering you many optimal costs. But the real thing remains, are your objectives clear? Have you identified the right workloads and have you taken the right type of coverage? Following that with DR drills, regular check, and making everybody very serious about such DR scenarios. So I really see that DR as a service in its new context will be more practical, people will be more engaged, and people will be willing to take a much better and practical coverage.
So on that note, Girish, another follow-up question to you. When it comes to any DR exercise, the most important element is about how quickly you can restore your data in case of a disaster. With DR as a service, does that kind of change the expectations of bringing things back?
Correct. So with DR as a service, I rightly said it, that there are many ways which in which you are actually ready for your DR. DR as a service is as the practice, and it use multiple components within it. That might be cloud, that might be some DR application tool, that might be some DR automation tool, which I also mentioned about. There might be certain run books. On top of that, do you have a DR process, which is to be implemented in the event of DR? How many of them are automated? How many of them are people dependent? So defining such objectives always gives you a clear picture in how much time you will be able to restore your business. Sticking to the data restore with the bandwidth growth and with cloud becoming so common currency, I see that from a technology perspective, we are much more prepared to do a much faster data restore to achieve more closure, RPO and RTO object.
Excellent. Jay, you've tried DR in both the manners. What difference do you see in DR on-premise versus DR on cloud in terms of architecture, in terms of overall utility? What is your experience like?
See, trust me, I mean, on-prem was solution on-prem was something like if your organization is ready to invest on CapEx piece, certainly that is something like normally people prefer. But at the same time, like now the world is pay-per-use kind of model, and nobody is specifically, like rightly Girish said, DR is kind of an insurance. And in insurance, certainly, like you do not want to put your lump sum money at one point of time. So on cloud, it certainly makes sense. But yeah, you need to take care of a lot many other things like which earlier, like which you do on-prem, because on-prem is kind of like you need to stack all the infrastructure workload basis like what you really require when the actual traffic will come in. So what I say is like if you are on cloud, then certainly you have an edge. You save on application modernization, re-architecture, because all those things like you will be doing during your DR drills or maybe pre-drills when you are setting up the DR structure altogether. Last minute huge data transfer, virtual boundaries, all those things like you don't need to reinvent the wheel when you are jumping onto the cloud. Because if your application is already running from the cloud, you are better prepared for such kind of environment. You might need to just improve the environment basis the resilience, because like there you get lot more advantage where you don't need to keep all your workload on at the same moment. I mean, you have a choice to scale up, scale down, using multi-region concept, multi-cloud concept, which is getting most and very much popular nowadays. Um, Else, if you are on-prem, first of all, you need to start thinking about like modernizing your app. What would be your data migration strategy? How do you create the similar security boundaries, whether those are possible on cloud or not? Because here, like everything is kind of like a perimeter security, box-based security. There, you need to completely go on layer 7, where you need to define, design everything basis application on. As the at the same time, like in case if you were running any kind of legacy application, certainly like you are gone. I mean, you need to modernize it before you have to take it to the cloud. Remove the IP related binding, whitelisting, all those things. So if, certainly, like if your cloud is, if your DR is on cloud, you get much more advantage, flexibility, resiliency, pay-per-use model, lot many advantages as compared to on-prem. And certainly, like from a cost standpoint, broadly, if you see, like I would just put it in a very simple way, like it is capex versus opex. It is just like you are paying the EMIs rather than just doing a lump sum from insurance.
So one of the fundamental questions with cloud when we started a couple of decades ago almost was about the bandwidth issue. People were worried that how much can they actually put on the cloud. Uh, Now, when we're talking about DR, I know we have a lot faster broadband connections and bigger pipes connecting enterprises. But how viable is it to put terabytes and petabytes of data on cloud?
I mean, see, again, it depends on like how you are designing your DR architecture. What is your data migration strategy? So when I say like, I mean, there are many flexible options certainly came from all these cloud providers, where at this moment, like you can go for express route, you can go via internet, you can go via like cloud connect. There are many terminology. So ultimately, like this is a dedicated pipe which you can establish from your data center to your cloud service provider. Certainly, two, three more players comes into the picture because this is not a single cloud provider's responsibility. So you need to deal with a couple of service providers in between. But otherwise, like if you do not want to deal with those things, you have an open internet. Trust me, like the way I had architecture our disaster recovery sites at this moment, everything runs on an open internet. But again, certainly not on an open internet. I'm using internet, but every all data transfer, data in motion or rest goes via the IPsec channel. Uh, at times, if in case if there is a fluctuation on the internet pipe, I get impacted, but that is during the time of replication, and that I am well covered in my BCPDR documentation related to my RPO. Otherwise, like I mean, it's a choice, and also it depends on the size of data, how many threads you are opening, how you are architecting your complete data migration strategy. This depends on all those things. Trust me, like this is no more a roadblock now. It is depending on the person, like or maybe the organization, how they are architecting the whole stuff for them.
That's quite interesting. I mean, accessing your DR site via open internet That's also a viability I wasn't really aware of. So thanks for pointing out. Girish, another important issue which comes about in cloud, and increasingly we are talking about it these days, is about data localization or data sovereignty. When we look at data DR as a service, what kind of visibility do we actually have on where the data is, and how it's actually moving across different sites?
Correct. So I think the first thing is data localization. So Varun, that's a very valid question, and of course, the entire industry is now becoming very specific in terms of data localization, and rather at times knowing the exact place of where their data will be residing in the event of DR or where you're replicating it. So of course, people like us, we are actually very transparent to customers who are with us. And as a practice, we are more than willing to tell them where their data is residing. At the same time, the real concern not only is data, where data is residing, how secured it is there, right? So it's very important that, with the growing mindset of security, you are not only having multiple compliances, which you are sticking to, right? So not only you are certified to them, you are actually sticking to them. So with your data having a second copy in the terms of a DR, it's very important that you are focusing a lot on where your data is residing, how well it is protected, and the environment should be compliant in line with all your security requirements. So of course, it's a growing need, and given the change in the security landscape, we see so many CISOs are very particular about how their data is being accessed, not only in terms of during your production run times as well as in the event of DR. Right, initially we heard on the panel itself that the security concerns, even in the event of a DR, you have to ensure a common security policy, right? Whether you are accessing it from the primary side or you're accessing it at the DR side. So of course, with the change in the landscape and the DR is going to gain more currency, you cannot do away with one important thing, that security has to be an integral component to it. Whatever security policies you have on primary have to be replicated at your DR site as well. At the same time, your data security in terms of the compliance and the processes that you are following in the primary should be verified at the DR site as well.
Right. And at the same time, when you're talking about primary, secondary side, today we are talking about not just one type of cloud, but there's private cloud, there's public cloud, and there's a mix of multiple public clouds and a mix of public and private. So, Jay, when it comes to deploying DR in a hybrid cloud environment, how challenging is it really for you to actually manage data?
So Varun, we need to understand, and this is a fact, probably because of this cloud buzzword, I mean, lot many technologies, or at least a non-mature audience, they think like this is a new technology. So let's first understand, cloud computing is just a new way of delivering computing resources. It is not a new technology. Technology is the same. As far as data sovereignty, data localization, data residency, all these are becoming critical for any organizations, because like we had started seeing the similar increase in the bad people like who have started damaging and waiting for the opportunity to bring a damage to an organization, right? So we need to all we have to focus is on the service design, build, how exactly we can modernize the application to meet the specific requirements of land of law, specifically focused on privacy, availability, reliability, and mostly for the organizations like the FSI, online services like us, e-commerce, wherever you see, because everywhere data is becoming online, and we with the GDPR coming on, I think more than 80 countries now, they are very, very specific, and they have started building some kind of privacy law for their organization, data localization law for their country, their continent. So, I mean, I would say okay, before porting data to any of the cloud, I would like to ask certain question to myself, and then automatically you will this will start opening the path for you, whether you are going for a single cloud, public cloud, multi-cloud, whatever it may be. So maybe like the questions would be something similar to like, do we have a cloud governance policy? So because this is not an on-prem. So similar to that, many organizations don't have the adequate policy in this area. A clear policy for digital document in motion or in rest, retention, focusing on data retention, and destruction in the context of cloud. All these things need to be asked. Are the cloud location or jurisdiction policies are too hard to accommodate the current land of law? These are few things like probably every organization will, or the every architect like who is designing the whole application, if they will start asking by themselves, I'm sure like slowly and slowly, like you will start getting the answers, and how to architect your complete either a migration to a single cloud or a multi-cloud strategy. We as an organization, we certainly like has followed multi-cloud organization strategy for certain applications, because we know certain cloud has a key benefits or key areas they focus a lot, where they are excelling. And why not, if I have an option, if I have a choice, can I re-architect and use the specific advantage of those CSPs, embed into my services, and take the advantage of the complete cloud? So, I mean, these are few things like I would start asking, and one last thing I would say is like monitoring of the complete data flow, how exactly your data is flowing, because nowadays like it is also call it like federated system, distributed system. So if you don't have the central monitoring strategy, how your data is flowing between the clouds or within a cloud as well, then I think like you will be, once you will start focusing on all these, you will be well covered.
I think that's a very well articulated strategy that you've talked about. One point that I also wanted to understand was, when you're expanding on cloud, how do you really keep track of your costs?
That's the typical one. I mean, trust me, like, I mean, all the CSPs, I do not want to offend anybody, but all the CSPs has some kind of methodology to track the uses of your existing spend. But you are the best judge. You need to keep a close eye on how your spends are. Either you want to use it on a different account, whether you want to do tag-wise segregation. It all depends on how you are strategizing, how your cost is going up and down. And there are certain tools like which every CSP has, but that gives you a limited information, which is an eye opener for you to understand your uses and your monitoring data. Once you combine both the things together, do a closer analysis on a regular period. I think like that's the better strategy to cover it up and control the cost, rather than just depending on any third party. And they can give you a SLA guarantee, but they certainly are not the good people to give you a cost guarantee, to be very honest.
There's certain things that you need to have full control over. And that's extremely important. Girish, I understand you have a presentation now. So, but before you actually get into your presentation, I just want to understand from you what is NetMagic's view of DR as a service?
Correct. So thanks, Varun. I think we really heard very interesting conversation today. NetMagic's view of DR as a service is, of course, we are more and more customer centric, and like people like Jay who are actually bringing. So IT fraternity is really very much friendly out there, and you see that we get the real time challenges. So what we have done over the time is, I really call it as a practice, because the challenges keep on changing. As I told you, right now we are having an unprecedented challenge, right? So what we do is we are very focused on what are the current challenges and how well do we solve with our solution in terms of DR as a service. So that practice continues to evolve. I can give an example that we are using 8 different tools because one size does not fit all, and it has to be very specific in line with customers' RPO and RTO objectives, his own budgets, as I rightly put it initially, that it's a kind of insurance. What kind of coverage you need, what kind of level of coverage you need. You might have even multiple things across your workloads, right? So what we are doing is making it a practice that people are able to achieve their EDR objectives. We are able to offer them the best practices. At the same time, a lot of automation which is available off the shelf, all the runbooks which are available off the shelf, we are able to utilize them to achieve better RPO and RTO objectives for each and every enterprises of ours. So I will say that this practice has evolved a lot, and I see with the growing coverage of the bandwidth over there, be it making much faster availability of so many cloud, this practice has even become much more better and advanced. So I really am very optimistic it is going to continue to grow and continue to be at much better TCO, right? We heard a lot about having single pane of glass across sea. You want to have better governance, visibility, control, even if you're in a multi-cloud environment, right? So that itself tells me that people are more conscious after due process. They have used the cloud. They are more conscious and they are more ready to respond to whatever challenges we have even after cloud usage. The same thing I see in DR, that we will be able to meet our objectives because we have practiced it over a time. We at NetMagic, we have been practicing DR for almost 20 years now, but we see now the proliferation is growing, right? So I see it as a wonderful evolving practice, and I see a lot of benefit should be passed on to our customers who are going to be with us.
Excellent. Girish, if you could start with your presentation now, but before that, I would just like to announce that we are getting a lot of questions from the audience. We'll take these questions up with Girish and Jay just after Girish's presentation. So, Girish, over to you.
Sure, Warren. Thank you. I hope my session is visible over there.
Yes, now it's visible.
So once again, warm welcome to everyone over there, and thank you so much. It's a privilege being in a discussion with you on today. So I have a short session, covering that how do we build a always resilient and secure IT infrastructure. I just want to highlight a few practices over there as part of this session. So we all as IT fraternity, we always want to be in swim with the digital transformation. We want to lead it, and that's what the core objective we have, right? But all these changes, like I spoke about COVID-19 as an unprecedented change, they really lead to other changes, right? How your people, processes, and technology change, and it has been changing over the years, right? How your markets change, your competitors will change. I see altogether a different business model emerging out of this current COVID-19 situation, right? So we see business models altogether change, right? At the same time, the more important thing, your customer expectations change. All consumer behavior scientists right now are at task, and they want to predict that how well the consumer behavior will change now, given the current situation. How many of the transformations will continue to exist even after this COVID-19 situation is over. So that's an interesting study because we all are running, all businesses run around current customers. They respond with new business models, and that's where, in order to make business, we then evolve our people, processes, and technology. So I see it as a chain, everything impacting each other. With COVID-19, we faced some different type of technology challenges. Nearly overnight, everybody went to work from home. We saw that many of customers were not ready. I understand that many organizations had inherent bottleneck at their place that they don't want to work from home. We have that style or Indian style of working where we feel that we need people face to face to get that feeling of work getting done. So definitely, similarly, the work from home control really failed overnight for people because they never anticipated this, right? Security was compromised in many places because it was never tested for that scale. Many places, manufacturing organizations were not even ready because they had a single manufacturing location. All applications were rather hosted within the same plant with no access to outside people, right? While it was comfortable earlier, the technology challenge was presented as soon as the nobody was able to access the plant facility itself. One more important thing that we saw is earlier your primary site was accessible to you, but when COVID-19 situation came, both the sites were not physically accessible to you, right? So that became an important challenge for many of the IT organizations over there. The network demand resources, yes. So we saw the network resources peaking up 6 to 7 times, right? So many technology challenges. Some people were not ready to meet such unprecedented network demands. What I did is I thought about it, that since we are talking about disaster recovery and we have only one situation in hand, right? Say COVID-19 situation. Why we don't analyze it? Because as I said, we at NetMagic have been doing this practice for nearly 20 years now in one form or the other. So now when we went back, I took a study back from almost 7 to 8 years back, right? Almost 2013, this study was done. And they said that disaster might happen because of many issues, right? They said that you know even security breaches, like for they might account for nearly 36% of the disasters, right? Human errors might account for 13%. Software failures, right, which the technologies that you are using in terms of software or the platforms, that might account for 15% of the failures. The power failures, they alone accounted for 43% of failures from in last 5 years with these CIOs, as that as who were interviewed for this study. Hardware failures accounted for almost 31% of the CIOs said that yes, we faced a downtime because of hardware failures. So the overall idea that I wanted to bring is, when we are talking about disaster, we have to think it in a more integrated way, that it is not about one situation. You are able to respond to multiple situations out there which might arise, which might vary from software failure to a single power failure to a single where the network availability is there, where users are available. So that's where it's an integrated, very comprehensive practice. That's where throughout the panel discussion we were talking not only about some tools, not only about some workloads, we were also talking about having a business continuity at the forefront of our overall objective. When we looked at it, we saw that always available infrastructure, that is a resilient IT infrastructure. We actually came out with some good practices that you might want to look into while drafting your overall DR strategy. They might be that you should migrate from legacy applications and you should have a modernized and simplified IT. I understand that this is a very complex thing. It's easier to write over here, but you should look up to it. Is the right idea. You can have applications which are more modern, because more modern applications might be more cloud friendly, or at least they are in a way more portable for you, and they're easier to migrate. They're more easier to do a DR as compared to legacy applications. We also spoke about to build a resilient IT infrastructure, right? I said that the power failures, a single hardware failure. So while defining your IT strategy for an always available infrastructure, you should look at all the high availability points at each and every layer. For example, is your hardware infrastructure, for example, at the compute layer, are you putting it in high availability? How many node failures can it sustain? You should have such things at the forefront and clearly defined. Is your network highly available? Even it might be as simple as that your network connectivity. Do you have a redundant network connectivity? So all such highly available points should be drafted well in your IT always available IT infrastructure strategy, and you should clearly know where it is not available and where it is available, so that you are prepared to respond to the situation. Yes, we spoke about adopting a multi-cloud and hybrid cloud IT strategy. It will give you a lot of freedom, because then you are free to choose, where should be your primary, where should be your DR. You are more open and more able to embrace all the capacity available there in terms of clouds over there, right? And by that, I really don't mean that it should be only hyperscalers. It can be even your private cloud. It can be 2 private clouds at your different locations, right? So we are speaking about a multi-cloud in a very open approach. More important is the always available infrastructure components are properly stitched. You should ensure a common security policy. So you should ensure a protection across your cloud, data center enterprises, your data assets. Adopt the managed services platform, right? So here, what I would like to emphasize is with clouds, not only infrastructure comes, what comes is actually managed services. What comes is a long experience of managing those kind of infrastructure. That's what you should be focusing on leveraging. And all cloud service providers, they are more tuned to even be available in the event of a situation like, for example, COVID-19. All our managed services are up and running for our people, right? There is no limitation to physical access to any facility. So you should go for managed services, so that even in the event of any of the downtimes which I cited earlier, you are able to get a proper in-time response, and you are able to actually take it to a faster closure. Right from end user to your data centers, to your private and public networks, or your security policies, your applications, everything should be available. That's what a business continuity practice is all about. So you should have the end-to-end connectivity. It is not only about when DR is there, it is not only about always available IT infrastructure. It should also be about all the process and everything has been stitched together. What we did is, as part of our practice, we broke it down into 4 portions which people should individually focus on. One of them is hybrid cloud. So during the panel, you heard that rather than dependency on one type of cloud, you should have a hybrid cloud kind of strategy where you're mixing and matching, either optimizing cost and increasing your availability. That's at the core. Your network should be highly available, because through network you are going to access all your applications. It should have a high availability. Your data continuity. So while your infrastructure is highly available, your data continuity in terms of practices, your processes, in terms of even, say, for example, your DR drills, you should ensure your data continuity. And of course, the most important thing is security. You should have a uniform security policy. Even DR as a service, when we were discussing, we saw that one size does not fit all. With so many changes having in the industry, we have people who are using bare metal, and we also have IT organizations which are using containers, right? So it's a broad spectrum out there. Even in terms of your IT strategy, you can see that whether you're using bare metals, private clouds, or you're using public clouds or containers, each and every layer you can stitch together with in the right fashion to give you always available infrastructure. We at NetMagic, we have been practicing this, that we are able to cater to each and every kind of infrastructure silo, irrespective of where our customer organizations are moving to. We are able to support them with many services. And in order to make this practice comprehensive, we have evolved ourselves over the time with various services that include security services, that includes giving managed services in any of these environments, giving even the migration services from one silo to another. If you want to change your DR strategy at any point of time, we are able to help you with the migration. So what I wanted to bring an overall strategy here is, while stitching it, you should look at the service providers who have already built up their practices to support you with any additional services that you might look up to while defining an always available IT infrastructure. It might include security, or it might include only migration, right? And from any format, bare metal, private cloud, or public cloud, right? In the same league, what we did is, many of our organizations came back and they said some of their endpoints, some of the locations did not have the feasibility for their own intranet. They did not have the MPLS in those regions. So services like SD-WAN, you can even deploy the SD-WAN services there and connect them to your own intranet. So the overall idea is, we have many such solutions to make it a complete story for you, right? In the 4 pillars, I was talking about data continuity, right? Now, giving data continuity a complete perspective. The data continuity is complete when you are able to merge your disaster recovery with your people and processes. Yeah, that's how we define data continuity. That you should, right from having an infrastructure layer which is highly available, to defining a recovery process. How will you recover? That's all covered as part of your disaster recovery. But have you done the validation testing? Have you done the risk management or security assessment if your people and processes when they access the DR site infrastructure, are your policies well articulated and very clear to people who are going to follow it. So that's where we define data continuity is a more comprehensive thing over there when we define DR as a service practice. Right, so as part of today's panel, we definitely discuss that there are the DR can be defined right at the hybrid cloud structure. You should use hybrid cloud. You should be using your failover and failback operations. You should be doing multiple DR drills. Ideally, we recommend that the minimum recommendation is every year you should do minimum 2 DR drills, yeah, right? And you should check if you are able to meet your objectives or not. You should be able to be in a continuous improvement process, right, in terms of your DR drills. We feel that I want to give you a quick beautiful example that there is a cold DR solution which is doing good with us. Is based on Zerto cold DR solution that we are offering to our customers. What we do is even if they're on their premises or they're in any hyperscalers or they're hosted with us, we can actually create a cold DR solution for them, whereby we actually cut down the cost of their infrastructure consumption at the DR site, right? But what more importantly is we are able to run many failover and failback operations from already available, a big bouquet of already available run books, right? You can consume them. You can in the lifetime, you can see on the live what are your RPOs and RTO as you are seeing it right now through governance. That can be achieved, right? So you get the real-time dashboards that you can utilize. But it is just an example. We, as part of our practice, like Zerto Cold DR is doing good with some customers. We have 8 different tools that because one size does not fit all. So I gave you an example that DR process has to be right at the infrastructure layer till the time DR plan development and implementation of it going through continuous improvement, right? So that's where we should be focusing on. Always, we recommend to our people that rather than manual processes which are very people dependent and might not follow all the processes defined in the book, it is better to automate a larger portion of it, right? While people and processes will still be involved in the DR processes, but as you can see on my screen that you by doing automation itself, you can actually simplify your DR drill exercises. You can actually increase availability in the real time, right? You can reduce the human intervention overall, right? And such automations always help, right? So even with the Zerto cold DR solution that we said, I can tell you that the beauty happens is whenever a DR is kicked in, automatically your VMs will be spinning on your DR site. So what we even further add up to our customers is we will charge them on the pay per hour basis only when the DR is kicked in for such sets of applications, right? So that's where such cold DR solution which are automated give you twofold benefit: a real-time governance, a real-time visibility, at the same time a lot of cost reduction, right, at the DR site. So I want to give you that example to connect with that, how DR as a service is growing out there in the market. The last aspect we spoke about and we wanted to cover about was security. So yes, as part of our practice, we always recommend that security has to be at the forefront of your design, that you're following uniform security policies. And we have seen that during this COVID-19 situation, a lot of people were not prepared. It might be as simple as that people did not have sufficient number of VPN connections in their infrastructure, but still there might be various issues. Incremental risks are there. You would have heard during the panel that there are many people who are willing to take advantage of any malpractice at your place, right? So they are available, they are here and more attentive right now more than before, because we all are doing work from home, and they know many endpoints are there which are more vulnerable. So we define people that you should be able to deliver a very high availability and security of your entire application. You should ensure high levels of security on your endpoint assets. That's very important thing you should look into while defining overall security framework for always available infrastructure. Even for the cloud workloads or multi-cloud, the security really is an important thing and should be taken into account while drafting the plan. The threat intelligence, there is a threat intelligence landscape. People like us also are also offering such services of threat intelligence landscape for you. But it is important that you have evaluated as many threats as are known to you, and you are ready to respond to them. Plus, you are able to take help from other security experts out there, so that you can define all the threat landscape, and you are ready to respond to that as much as possible. With the increasing use of endpoint assets of your users, shadow IT monitoring should also be taken into account. So, without taking much time, final thoughts from my side would be that you should adopt hybrid multi-cloud or a public cloud to ensure a more available infrastructure, and you should adopt the managed services, right? The managed solutions might help you off the shelf until unless you have something very custom, but more managed solutions come at more or less cost, more practice benefits, so you should be able to leverage them. You should think through security at right at the planning stage is important. You should think about your network as well, that it should be highly available. Otherwise, you might have two sites, but your network is not sufficient enough to do the business continuity. That should not happen. So that's a very important thing, and you should be willing to extend your network to the clouds in a secured way. That's very important. And more important is be prepared for the worst, right from data protection strategy to having a disaster recovery setup. You should have a redundant setup. So these are final thoughts from our side in terms of always available infrastructure. Once again, thank you so much for hearing and bearing with me so patiently. Over to Varun again.
Thank you so much, Girish. That was an insightful presentation. So, just before you got into the presentation, a number of questions that you questioned the audience. So, the first question was there. I think there's some echo that's coming. Give me one sec.
Yeah, looks like there is an echo, Varun.
Is it better now?
It is better.
Okay, perfect. So Jay, basically there's a question around DR as a service. So the gentleman wants to know that since DR is kind of an insurance to your existing infra and data, then why shouldn't it be owned on-premise rather than taking on cloud?
Again, I think like I had already talked about this. So it is like, you want to do a term life insurance or you want to go for specific insurance. So where like you have a flexibility to pay. So it is your choice. I mean, nobody says like, okay, on-prem is bad or on cloud is very good. But yeah, certainly you get a lot more flexibility on cloud because like it is the way you will architect your application. You may not need to keep all the required infrastructure up and running every time. And this would be only, and you need to pay as per your use. So in case like if you need to fork and do a complete DR drill on cloud, at that particular time itself, like your cost is going to incur as a whole. Otherwise, like you do it on-prem or you do it on cloud, like it's completely your choice. It's depending on how the application has been architected, what the land of laws need to be followed. If there are certain sensitive data, which specifically like normally banks do have, or any BFSI industry do have, and which you cannot put it on anything like outside your perimeter network, then it is your or that particular organization's judgmental call. It's a call need to be taken. But yeah, it's your choice. Nobody says like, okay, on-prem is bad.
Absolutely. It just depends on what kind of priorities you have, rather. So the next question we briefly talked about, in discussion with Girish. So the question is about how backing up data on cloud is fine, but restoration could be a nightmare with infra issues. This is a question coming in. The gentleman wants to understand how easy or difficult would it be to actually restore your data from the cloud.
Okay, so I think it's a very, very valid question. When you are doing a backup onto cloud, you are getting a kind of data protection there. But looking at the bandwidth challenges, when it comes to restoration, you should clearly define that how much restoration time you are going to take, because you're going to again now, while backing it up on the cloud, you might be doing the incremental backups, which you were restoring it but while restoring it, you might want to do a full restore. So you should be well prepared in terms of how much time it is going to take to you in terms of restore. But it is very much practically possible, and people are getting used to such backups and restores. The other way around it is we see a kind of structure where people do a remote backup with us, and at the same time they have some infrastructure within the same data center where in the event of any such eventuality, they are able to restore the data onto those infrastructure which is immediately closer to the backup location, right? So you can use such strategy, but it is very much possible if you have defined your objectives and the time it is going to take very clearly.
Girish, just to add to what you said, probably again, restoration is something like you can achieve it with your custom tools as well. So there are many service providers like backup service provider like Veeam or Commvault. They also provide such kind of specific real-time RTO in terms of like restorations as well. So I mean, doing a manual way of like backup and restoring it on cloud, and then struggling to find the real RTO. I mean, in case if you are so concerned about, there are various tools as well which can be used to know the real time time required to restore from the cloud to on-prem, or maybe cloud to cloud itself. I mean, that depends on.
I think that answers it pretty clearly. So the next question is a bit related to what we just discussed. The gentleman wants to understand, having data replicated on a DR side, does that eliminate the need for other backup solutions?
Okay, Girish, you want me to pick it up?
Yeah, why not? Please, I'm more than
Okay.
please, you can share it.
Okay, so I mean, trust me, like that's again, I mean, from a business standpoint, people says like, okay, if I have a DR site, why do I need a backup to be taken? Trust me, it is again like what kind of insurance you are going into. So it is all about like what is DR? DR is ultimately a copy of your existing real-time running data itself. And in case if there is any issue happens on the real-time data, that is also going to get replicated there on the real-time backup. So real-time disaster recovery site, not on the backup. So backup is, when we say like it is a backup is somewhere, we call it like it's little offline rather than online. So when we say offline, and then so there are two or three different kinds of backups, right? So you keep one full copy and then the incremental or differential based on your strategy. So in case if anything happens on the real data corruption, and that is not going to get copied, or that if it is going to get backed up, it will be only the incremental changes which is going to get corrupt, not the whole set of backup. So that majorly clarifies like why we need a real time, and that's where somewhere like hot backup, cold backup, disaster recovery. I mean, lot many terminologies comes into picture. So just do a due diligence in terms of like what are you exactly looking for. If it is something like if you want to restore on time, or maybe like a specific time, then your backup strategy should be like that. Certainly, it is not the real-time replication which can able to recover from that disaster in case the real copy goes corrupt.
Fair enough. Next question, and I think we just have time for two last questions. So the question is around security. A gentleman wants to understand if zero trust would be a preferred option over traditional VPN when deciding failover approach for users working from home during a DR switchover. So I don't know, Girish, if you'd like to take this, maybe.
Correct. So I think that's rightly said, but what it's very true. So in technical terms, yes, zero trust is a much better solution than having only a VPN connectivity. Very much said yes. But when we were talking about today the disaster recovery and the security practice, yes, we are talking about many such solutions which give rise to a right security framework. So rightly they said zero trust is a better solution because or maybe it starts from a strategy denial, right? Until unless it's a trusted user, it cannot, although it can access, but it will have no visibility into any of the applications there. So such zero trust solutions are, of course, yes. In the security framework, if you see, multiple services are evolving now at each and every layer. Right, it is no longer only and only about doing a basic security like you are having an antivirus or anti-malware. So I would like to extend this, that it is security at each and every layer, right? So you will have a antivirus and anti-malware. You'll do the basic hardening. On top of that, even at the firewalling layer, you might need to think of a UTM. You can go one step ahead. You can think of cloud-based or appliance-based DDoS. So when we are talking about security practice, it should be at each and every layer. But this is only in terms of infrastructure. Application level securities are also there. We spoke about zero trust, so connectivity level security should be also there. So it's all about having security framework in place to have security at each and every layer. That's the core of our overall strategy.
Thanks, Girish. So there's one final question. I'll give it to Jay, considering that he's the actual user. So because the question is asking about a real use case on what workloads can be migrated to cloud. What specific services are you using on cloud?
So to be very honest, like if I need to explain my use case, trust me, as an online classified organization, we do have various business, and typically all business is online. So whether it is on online jobs, online matrimonial, online real estate, online education, there are many more as well. Uh, so everything, trust me, everything at this moment, I have a disaster recovery site. So like there is no such application like which cannot have a disaster recovery site or that cannot be ported on cloud. Certainly, it's a matter of concern. Like when if I have certain applications, I'll just try to practically relate it with one of the database thing where people could able to relate. So if I am using a database, maybe on an open source version of MySQL, and in that MySQL, like I'm using an engine which is a legacy engine. For example, like it is a MySM engine. So none of the managed cloud service providers, managed database service supports that engine. So that's a typical challenge. That's a legacy challenge. So where you need to first modernize your existing production infrastructure itself, where like your all the tables, databases, complete database schema has to be using a single engine called InnoDB, which is the latest engine and most preferred engine from MySQL or Oracle in MySQL use case. And once you have that, then probably you don't have any stopping on the cloud itself, whether it is your own instance or a managed service, managed database service, you can move anywhere. So it is all about like I run everything, trust me, everything, whether it is like a lamp stack, whether it is a database. Again, from a database, when I say like it is not only RDBMS, NoSQL database, caching database, queuing system, uh, uh, functions, email service, everything I use it on cloud. So if I can use it, I'm pretty sure like in the world, like there are much more advanced and much more knowledgeable people like they can use anything on the cloud. Trust me.
Absolutely. I think that's very well put. So with that, we've run out of time. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking time out. It was a highly engaging session, and we actually have a lot of questions still coming from the audience. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take all of them. But thanks so much for joining in and sharing your thoughts on this pertinent topic. And thanks all our attendees too for joining in and listening in to us. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you, Girish. Take care.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.